Having the reactor in the house is a great topic for dinners. I always joke when I invite friends over that one evening at our houses, like 5 X-rays. Of course, it is not true, but it is so funny. Their faces always turn pale for a second. You should see them. Then I usually laugh and everything's fine. I am just joking, you know? Although my wife does not think so, she's afraid that our friends will look at us like we are some kind of nuclear mutants. But this house has the same radiation as everywhere else. So no apocalypse, not yet.
Modern society is based on centralization. The centralized state institutions are indeed the greatest invention of modernity. Centralization allowed new forms of governance. It allowed new production of durable identity and new ways of production of goods. So why do we want to abandon it? Why are we so scared of centralization?
I got an invitation to the police yesterday. Supposedly, a group of hackers attempted to break into Habitant's security system. Habitant says no information was leaked, but who knows? We'll see what the police have to say.
Centralization is often associated with totality. The totality of the state, of the party, of one leader. However, this totalizing nature of modernity allowed an unprecedented expansion of human knowledge and material well-being. Yet it also allowed unprecedented destruction. The postmodern dream of decentralization is an attempt to escape this destruction. The Internet was born to avoid a nuclear catastrophe during the Cold War. The very idea of a decentralized information system was supposed to save the US Army from paralysis in case of a nuclear attack.
Do you want to hear a rhyme I made up? If the reactor is green, it is a little bit mean. If the reactor is red, it wanna be in his bed. If the reactor is white, it want a delicious bite. Do you like it?
However, this dream outlived its original context of the Cold War. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, decentralization and globalization seemed unstoppable. The whole of humanity was supposed to reconnect into a vast, decentralized global village, where everyone would adopt the cosmopolitan consumerist lifestyle.
I live on the 3rd floor, which is the closest to the reactor. The ground floor, 1st and 2nd floor are free. There are common areas. We can exercise, read, or just spend time there. But there must be no appliances to reduce the risk of fire to as little as possible. To be honest, Tellurian has brought a lot of people together. You know, when you live in a house with a reactor, it kind of brings you together. We all know each other here, except for the people who live in apartment 15. I heard a movie star moved in, but I have not seen her or him.
In a sense, it is an escape from modernity back to a heavily romanticized idea of traditional society, to the warm embrace of the domestic community where everybody knows our name. This community romanticism ignores the intricate and also very oppressive and totalizing dimensions of life in traditional society. The traditional society was certainly more decentralized, and particular communities were more self-sufficient than their modern counterparts. However, they were also, in many respects, less inclusive and more controlling of their members.
I did the maintenance for the Tellurian house, and I have to say I remember only the good old days. I liked the house a lot. Technical novelty, was it? The house used to be new and clean. The shared spaces I liked the most. Thanks to shared spaces, everybody got together. We played. We cleaned. We told stories. Everything was done together. And I like it a lot. Thanks to the community, I did not feel lonely, you know, at the moment when I used to live in the Tellurian house. My wife was long gone. So in a way, Tellurian community saved me.
Decentralization thus can and often is a source of inner and outer conflict. The members of communities can struggle with the strict social norms enforced through social control. The decentralized groups can be in conflict with each other over resources or members. Therefore, traditional societies employed very sophisticated kinship systems as means of social organization. The kinship structures were in place to prevent destructive conflicts and personal vendettas from destroying society's fabric. Yet they were also highly prescriptive of individual biographies. The family and situation into which one was born pretty much determined their whole life trajectory. Social control allowed very limited means, social mobility.
I moved to this house with my mom and brother. I never met my dad, but mom always said dad died in the green energy strike. Well, this might sound weird, but we got used to living there very quickly, especially because it provided a good place to live. We used shared spaces to play with other kids, and their families were really close. My mom even worked in a company that collected nuclear fuel to be enriched and reused. I remember one weird fact. They told me to not go near the reactor, or your hair won't grow, and you will never find a boyfriend. It was just a scary rumor that my mom used to tell me. Of course, it was not true, or realistic, or scientific proven. Very soon, I realized the process is quite simple and safe, so I got used to it, and instead of fearing it, I found out more about the process and the circular idea behind the fuel.
The inner conflicts were to a degree elevated and reduced by the modern state, as the state granted almost every member a stable identity as a citizen. It liberated people from the shackles of direct social control exercised by their peers. It allowed them to pursue happiness and well-being outside their original communities. The chains of tradition were torn apart. As Marx and Engels put it, all that is solid melts into air. People were thus free to move within the territory of the state and could be deployed in the service of the newly emerging capitalist class.
A few weeks ago, a fire started on the 5th floor of Tellurian in the early morning. I wasn't even awake, but I heard it from the neighbors that firefighters were called immediately. They say the reactor's fine, but who knows?
On the other hand, the modern gaze was highly reductive. In order to function properly, modern institutions needed everything to be reduced to easily classifiable and ideally also quantifiable data. The modern bureaucrats were by the very design of their vocation blind to multiple dimensions of human life, and especially to human suffering. This indifference to the lived experience is what allowed modernity to unleash the most terrifying atrocities of 19th and 20th centuries, namely the colonization, World War I and II, and the Holocaust.
I was one of the first to move into the house, but I have to admit that the Tellurian 14 project looked fakeish or spamish. Even so that I eventually attended a presentation by Habitant. Interesting but sort of scientific and boring. They mentioned one interesting fact. It was said that potential tenants would only have to pay some minimum rent. The cost of energy and heat will be zero as the source will be in the basement. It seemed too good to be true. Then we were told that we would have a nuclear reactor in the basement. You know, my grandma was born just after the Chernobyl explosion. So there was some aversion from my side. I heard a lot of scary stuff about nuclear power. But if nuclear is seen as the resource of the present and the future, then I guess there's been a development. When even a house from the 1930s can have its own reactor, it has to be safe, right?
As a response to these historical tragedies, The modern state pushed hard to secure the well-being of its citizens in order to secure social stability, since the state also allowed a broader distribution of social responsibility. The well-being of individuals was suddenly guaranteed not only by close relatives but also by all fellow citizens, even though this was done through impersonal means of taxation and social welfare. Through centralization, it was possible to control and redistribute wealth and resources as necessary. Members of the capitalist class were thus forced to participate in the mitigation of contradictions they themselves produced.
There's a certain hostility from the residents of the other houses. More or less the whole street, maybe even the neighborhood, is kind of pissed off that something like Tellurian is here. I can understand it to a certain extent because they haven't had a chance to say no to Tellurian. No one has consulted with them on this project. The town has teamed up with Habitat without any public hearing, and the residents of the neighborhood didn't find out about the existence of Tellurian until the moment it was introduced. But then again, we've been living here for weeks and weeks. I'm not a parasite or a threat. Neighborhood could be definitely nicer to us.
It is the neoliberal attempt to avoid this social responsibility that pushes decentralization as its political agenda. During the last 50 years, we bore witness to the decentralization of care and social reproduction via the promotion of the nuclear family and the undoing of the welfare state. We witnessed the decentralization of the economy via privatization and financialization, and we daily experience the decentralization of culture caused by the digital revolution. In all these cases, decentralization was championed as a means of liberation, just to introduce new inequalities and ways of domination over the poor and marginalized. Poor families are driven to poverty. Privatization gives birth to international corporations with monopoly power, and native and local cultures are being appropriated and erased by westernization.
My mom said I cannot go into the basement, but the older kids said I was a coward. I'm a little scared because I did not know what is in the basement. Who works there? But the older kids mock me and yell at me. Chicken, 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 but I'm not a chicken. I'm just a little bit cautious. You know, being cautious is a good thing.
The effects of decentralization can be seen in the emergence of echo chamber and social bubbles, in the widening wealth gaps, not only between states but also within states themselves. We aim to escape into our little self-sufficient communities and leave the world behind closed doors. This, of course, benefits mainly the wealthy. Societies become more and more fragmented. Rich people hide in their gated communities and the rest of us fight each other over what's left. The myth of decentralization pushes further the dangerous idea that we are no longer responsible for the society as a whole.
My parents and I have been living here for about a month. I like it here. There is more light than in our previous house. But I can't go in the basement. It's no place for kids, or so my mom tells me. But children from the 4th floor said that there is a monster. And this monster always comes out once in a while and eats whoever is closest. That is why once a month the men in white coats come here to calm the monster down. Maybe bring it some sweets so it won't eat anybody. I always carry a lollipop in my pocket, in case I meet the monster, so I give it a lollipop instead of me.
Even though decentralization might bring us benefits of higher variability of the way we organize our societies and look for best practices, it lacks means to secure social cohesion. Through the modern interdependence of organic division of labor, our society was integrated into a somewhat functional whole. However, with the push towards decentralization, this integration falls apart. We can see it in the emerging identitarian politics, isolationisms and nationalisms. Even these are consequences of decentralization.
Did you know that Habitat recycles fuel from big nuclear power plants, but has no idea what to do with our nuclear waste? One possible solution is to store the waste in a deep underground repository on Finnish territory. But from my perspective, this solution seems like long shot. If Habiton doesn't find a solution in time, does that mean the used fuel will stay in the house? Does that mean we'll have nuclear waste at home?
Naturally, the state never worked perfectly, and its potentialities were very often misdirected and misused by the powerful elites. Yet, amid this valid criticism, we seem to lose track of the benefits centralized structures can bring to our social life. The further approaching of social disintegration and fragmentation threatens the stability of our social and ecological systems. If we want to decentralize, we have to do it responsibly and under a banner of unity. We have to develop durable social institutions and structures that will help us kickstart the processes of social integration anew and bring us to a more sustainable collective future.
Well, since Habiton started to work with the idea of small nuclear reactors in Prague, people thought it was mad. Once they carefully start operating few, it actually opens space for better housing. More human-friendly, so to say. But of course, sometimes it is too good to be true. Sometimes accidents could happen. But I do not like to talk about it. We will not talk about it.